count number one as to Donald Meyer. Did you intentionally take some action? My understanding is that you used a handgun, a pistol, or a revolver. Did you do that intentionally?
Yes, Your Honor.
Shaking as he addressed a judge, a stunning end to a horrific case. This kid, once named Student of the Month, now says he did kill his parents. He lived with their bodies inside their suburban home for nearly 2 weeks, then fled, allegedly, hoping to make it to the other side of the world before he was caught in rural Kansas. And all of this was part of a plan to eventually kill the President of the United States. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. Well, this case was really one twist after another ever since Nikita Casap's parents were found shot dead inside their home outside Milwaukee in February of last year. Now, this is Nikita Casap entering court today, and I'll talk about what went down that really came as a shock to many of us who have covered this case from the very beginning, because it is a case that has so many layers to it, including the layer of this allegedly being part of a plot to assassinate the President of the United States. Now, I'll explain that part here in a moment. To really understand why today's court hearing was so shocking and why it might make sense for Nikita Casap to agree to what he did in court, I want to get you caught up on how we got to this point in the story. We need to go back to February 28th of last year. That is when police in Waukesha, Wisconsin found Nikita Casap's mom and his stepdad dead inside their home. Now, this place, it's not far from Milwaukee. You can see they lived on what appears to be a cul-de-sac, just a really nice neighborhood. And this here is a picture of the couple, Don Meyer, Nikita's stepdad on the left, and then Tatiana Casap, that is Nikita's biological mom, on the right. Now, Meyer's mom told police that her son had sent her text messages that she found to be odd. Earlier in the week on February 23rd, she said that her son, who is Nikita's stepdad, had also texted another family member saying that he felt sick and he was just going to take time off of social media. Now, around the same time, police also received a call from Nikita Casap's high school that he hadn't shown up for 2 weeks, and at that point, he had perfect attendance on the year. And when police entered the house, that's when this story took a horrific turn, because they found Nikita's stepdad shot in the head in one room, and then Tatiana, his mom, shot dead in another. Both of their bodies were covered in blankets. Now, the big question at that point was, where was Tatiana's then 17-year-old son, Nikita? A neighbor said that he saw him driving away in Don's VW Atlas roughly 5 days earlier. It's important to note that Nikita Casap did not have a driver's license. Police also pinged Don and Tatiana's phones, and they showed up 15 hours away in Wyoming. Now, Nikita's phone pinged in Iowa at the world's largest truck stop, which is 11 hours from where his parents' phones showed up in Laramie, Wyoming. Police checked surveillance video at that truck stop, and they say they saw Nikita. They saw his stepdad's car, and Nikita was with the family dog.
Is your last name pronounced Casap?
Casap.
Casap? Okay.
Now, Casap was eventually arrested in Kansas, and then he was sent back to Wisconsin to face charges. So let's talk about the evidence that came out in this case, and there is a lot. So inside of Don Meyer's car, police found a gun, and it was a gun that was missing from the home, and it allegedly matched the kind that was used in the shooting of Don and Tatiana. There were also electronics and an SD card. Police say on that SD card were videos from inside the Waukesha house. They showed Nikita Casap lighting candles around his stepdad's dead body, seemingly to cover the scent as it laid there for days. Police think that Don and Tatiana were actually killed on February 11th, which means Nikita likely lived in the house with the bodies of his parents for nearly 2 weeks until that neighbor saw Nikita leaving on February 23rd in his stepdad's car. In the recorded video, police say that Nikita also seemed to be holding a phone up to Don's body, showing someone what he had allegedly done. Now, why would a teen who not only had perfect attendance, but was once even the student of the month for his high school's health department do something like this? Well, the next part of this story, I remember when this came out, and this made my jaw drop. According to investigators, Casap killed his parents to get the financial means to kill President Trump and overthrow the U.S. government and to commit several terrorist attacks. I'm going to let that just sit there for a second. Now, the Waukesha County Sheriff's Office looked through Nikita Casap's phone, and they reportedly found some disturbing conversations in Russian with people on TikTok and the platform Telegram, which bills itself as a place for free speech, but it is controversial because of alleged criminal activity that can be on that platform. The FBI says that Casap had material on his phone related to the Order of the Nine Angles, which the agency says is a network of people with neo-Nazi, racially motivated extremist views. O9A advocates for the use of violence and terrorism to overthrow governments and destroy modern civilization. So let's now dive more into who Nikita Casap is and who he was potentially talking to on social media in Russian. Now, the warrant says between February 14th and 24th, the days after Casap allegedly killed his parents, and when he was living with their bodies in the house, he had messages on Telegram in Russian that said, quote, "Reply to them all and say you got sick, and drag them to the basement." Now, remember, at the beginning, Don's mom had called police in part because of some odd text messages that she said she had received from her son. Based on investigators' timelines, these text messages were sent after Don and Tatiana were killed. The FBI apparently had already made contact with the Casap family back in 2023, and we still, to this day, we don't know a lot about that meeting, but we do know that federal agents had talked to Nikita's family in November of that year. In the newly unsealed document, agents say that Nikita Casap, who went by the username Awoken on TikTok, had conversations with someone else about the racist ideology of the Order of the Nine Angles, or 0NA. Now, this was in December of last year, roughly 2 months before his parents were murdered. He tells another user that he talked to a girl about the ideology and she was, quote, pretty chill about it. And he said if his parents were to find out, quote, they would take away my phone away if they did, especially since FBI visited, LOL. Authorities also found Casap talking on Telegram under the username Accelerationist. And on January 21st, which is less than a month before his parents were killed in February of 2025, he was reportedly talking with someone about a terror attack, asking, quote, what country do you think will get the blame for this? With an unknown user replying, quote, Russia will be blamed for it. This is the goal. Nikita then goes on to say, quote, when the time comes for me to send my manifesto to you so you can spread it online, should it be PDF? And also, you won't anyhow change or modify the manifesto. The FBI says they found the manifesto. It's 3 pages long and talks about the killing of the President of the United States to create a political revolution and to, quote, save the white race from, quote, Jewish-controlled politicians, with the final page having images and words praising Adolf Hitler. Quote, as to why specifically Trump, I think it's obvious. By getting rid of the president and perhaps the vice president, that is guaranteed to bring in some chaos. And not only that, but it will further bring into the public the idea that assassinations and accelerating the collapse are possible things to do, end quote. Casap would also write, quote, as a side note, the other attacks that may occur, what they are, who they target, I have no idea, even if they are same ideology as I. Point being, this manifesto is specifically for the attack that targets Trump. Now, a key piece of evidence in this case will be the amount of money and jewelry that Casap had with him when he was arrested in Kansas. He had with him a pried open safe, women's jewelry, $14,000 in cash, and banking documents. It appears Casap wanted to use that money, which he was able to obtain by allegedly killing his parents, to buy a drone that he would reportedly use in a terror attack. In another Telegram conversation, Casap speaks with user Angel of Death about a drone with a dropping mechanism. Casap allegedly asks about caring for a drone, and the user tells him that the amount would cost between $1,200 and $1,500. They also allegedly talk about an IED, or improvised explosive device. Casap also asked for headphones that could protect his ears from the sound of a .357 Magnum. That is the gun that he used to kill his mom and stepdad. So it's important to note that Casap reportedly talked about paying in Bitcoin because in previous court appearances, state prosecutors say that he had stopped at a Bitcoin vending machine on his multi-state drive after allegedly killing his parents. The reason Nikita drove west from Wisconsin after murdering his parents, it seems to have come from online orders from a Ukrainian phone number on Telegram. Casap also spoke with someone who writes in an Eastern European dialect that gave him coordinates to drive from southwest Wyoming through Kansas to a location near Oklahoma. And Casap asks, quote, "Then from there to Eureka, California, it is 30 hours. You think I'll have enough time?" Casap asks questions like, "How long will I need to hide before I will be moved to Ukraine?" Quote, "Also, I probably should brush up on my Russian because I can understand just fine, but speaking is harder. So while in Ukraine, I will get a normal job and have a normal life, even when it's found out I did it." He also said, "Do the 10 other people have similar beliefs to I, or are they different?" And there's also a message that is cut off that says, quote, "Assuming that my parents won't leave." So you can see here, it appears that law enforcement had an incredibly strong case against Nikita Casap. Heading into Thursday morning, Casap faced 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide and 2 counts of hiding a corpse. And he also faced some lesser state charges, including theft of property over $10,000. Thursday morning, he pleaded guilty to the 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, and the rest of the charges against him are being dismissed. Here is Casap answering the judge's questions, and I want you to take a look at his chair as he is answering the questions compared to his lawyers, and you can see him, it appears that he is shaking as he's speaking.
Is that your understanding of what the state's position is?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And is it your understanding, sir, that you and your attorney are going to be free to argue for whatever you believe to be an appropriate sentence or sentences in this matter?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is it also correct, sir, that you and Mr. Raffel have discussed the parameters, that is, the extent of the sentences? That is, if you're found guilty of these 2 counts of first-degree intentional homicide, on each count it carries with it a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of extended supervision. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
But on the other side, there is an option where the court could allow for extended supervision eligibility, not a promise of it, but the opportunity or eligibility for extended supervision after 20 years you've served on each sentence. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
So it's not a minimum, but it's the possibility exists for extended supervision after 20 years on each sentence. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. And you feel that Mr. Raffel's explained that to you adequately?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I'm going to talk to you now about some of the other aspects of this plea questionnaire and waiver of rights form. Mr. Raffel, you have a copy of it in front of your client?
I do.
All right. This tells me that you are 18 years of age and you've completed 11 years of school. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
These incidents interfered with your finishing high school, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Do you have any problem reading at all?
I do not, Your Honor.
All right. Were you able to read and understand the documents that have been generated in this case? In other words, police reports, statements from witnesses perhaps, or other documents that have been generated in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
And also, were you able to read and understand these documents that you've submitted to me with the plea questionnaire and waiver of rights form?
Yes, Your Honor.
This also tells me you understand English. That's why I asked this question about your level of education, because it's really not just how far did you get in school, but whether you were able to comprehend and understand all the materials that have been generated in this case. Do you feel you've had time to do that as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Now, this says you understand the charges to which you're pleading, and in fact, you and your attorneys, I should say, have included with the plea questionnaire what's called the jury instructions for these offenses for first-degree intentional homicide. It's numbered 1010, and it sets out the elements of the offense that the state would have to prove if this case went to trial. Did you review that with Mr. Raffel?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you understand what the state would have to prove if you went to trial in each of these cases?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, we're going to talk about those elements in a little bit, all right? This also tells me you are not receiving any treatment for a mental illness or disorder. Is that true?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is it also true that you've not had any alcohol, medication, or drugs in the last 24 hours?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. Raffel, I'm going to ask you about as I always do, about the understanding of English and reading and so on. Mr. Casap is 18 years of age, was 17, I believe, when you commenced your representation. Do you feel that you've had a sufficient amount of time to review with your client the discovery materials in this case?
Yes, Your Honor.
And there, I presume, were video recordings as well. Did you review those with him as well?
We did.
All right. Any doubt about his ability to comprehend or understand, or let me take a step back. Any difficulties whatsoever in communicating with your client?
No.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you now about your constitutional rights. This document that you have in front of you says, I understand that by entering this plea, I give up the following constitutional rights. Each right is listed here. There's a box next to each one. Each box has an X through it. Does that mean you've reviewed all those rights with your attorney?
Yes, Your Honor.
Does that mean you understand those rights?
Yes, Your Honor.
And does that mean you're giving up those rights?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, tell me if this is true. It says, I give up my right to a trial. True?
Yes, Your Honor.
I give up my right to remain silent, and I understand that my silence could not be used against me at trial. True?
Yes, Your Honor.
I give up my right to testify and present evidence at trial. True?
Yes, Your Honor.
I give up my right to use subpoenas to require witnesses to come to court and testify for me at trial. You understand a subpoena is a court order that you and your attorney could get, and you could require witnesses to come to court on your behalf, even if they didn't want to. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Is it correct and true that you're giving up that right as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
It says, I give up my right to a jury trial where all 12 jurors would have to agree that I'm either guilty or not guilty. Is that true?
Yes, Your Honor.
I give up my right to confront in court the people who testify against me and cross-examine them. Cross-examine means that you and your attorney could question witnesses to test the truthfulness and accuracy of what they have to say. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is it correct that you're giving up that right as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
And then finally it says, I give up my right to make the state prove me guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that true?
Yes, Your Honor.
And did you discuss the concept of what it means for a reasonable doubt?
Yes, Your Honor.
Your attorney talked to you about that?
Yes.
Any questions about these rights, sir?
No, Your Honor.
Anybody in any way force you to give up these rights?
No, Your Honor.
All right, let's take a look at the charge against you, sir, or charges, I should say. Count number one in the information alleges that on or about February 11, 2025, at an address on Cider Hills Drive in the village of Waukesha, Waukesha County, Wisconsin, you did cause the death of victim A, who's identified as Donald Mayer, M-A-Y-E-R, with intent to kill that person, contrary to Wisconsin law listed in the information. What is your plea to count one, sir?
Guilty, Your Honor.
All right. Count number two says on the same date and location, February 11, 2025, at the address on Cider Hills Drive in the village of Waukesha, Waukesha County, Wisconsin, you did cause the death of victim B, who's identified as Nikita Casap, with intent to kill that person, contrary to Wisconsin law listed in the information, a Class A felony. What is your plea to that charge, sir?
Guilty, Your Honor.
All right. Did you commit these offenses?
Yes, Your Honor.
So as to count number one, as to Donald Meyer, did you intentionally take some action? My understanding is that you used a handgun, a pistol, or a revolver, and you shot him and caused his death. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Did you do that intentionally?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you knew that shooting him would cause his death?
Yes, Your Honor.
And as to count two, Nikita Casap, and the same questions for you. Did you take an action? Did you use a handgun to shoot her and kill her?
Yes, Your Honor.
Was that your intent, sir?
Yes, Your Honor.
You admit you committed both of these offenses.
Yes, Your Honor.
Ms. Basie, you offered the complaint originally filed as a factual basis.
I do.
All right. Any objection, Mr. Raffel?
No, Your Honor.
Do you understand, Mr. Casap, on your pleas of guilty, I will find you guilty. If you're not a citizen of the United States, your pleas could result in deportation, the exclusion of admission to this country, or the denial of naturalization under federal law. Is that clear?
Yes, Your Honor.
Furthermore, because these are felony offenses, you may not vote in any election until your civil rights are restored to you. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
And because these are felonies, it's unlawful for you to possess a firearm. If you ever possess a firearm, you could be found guilty of a serious offense resulting in up to a 10-year term of imprisonment and a $25,000 fine or both. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
Furthermore, this is a violent felony. It's considered, of course, a violent felony. Therefore, it is unlawful for you to possess body armor as well. Clear?
Yes, Your Honor.
Also, where these charges, the other charges, are going to be dismissed and read in, it means I'll consider that you committed those offenses. I'll hold you responsible for them, but you will not be found guilty or sentenced for them, although I could also order that you pay restitution as well. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
You cannot be prosecuted for those in the future. Do you understand that as well?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you understand if I find that your plea is knowingly, freely, and voluntarily made, I will find you guilty. You're pleased. Do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Have you had enough time to talk to your attorney about everything?
Yes, Your Honor.
Are you entering your pleas and giving up your rights freely and voluntarily?
Yes, Your Honor.
Do you have any questions for me or for your attorneys at this juncture?
No, Your Honor.
WISN TV in Milwaukee got a statement from the Waukesha District Attorney that reads, quote, with the defendant set to enter guilty pleas to 2 counts of intentional homicide, the families can avoid the trauma of a public trial. They are relieved to see the defendant accept responsibility. The evidence in this case was substantial, and the decision to plead guilty acknowledges its strength. Following Thursday's plea hearing, we will focus on securing a just sentence that reflects the gravity of these offenses and the profound loss to our community. Joining us now to talk more about this case is prosecutor and the former Deputy Attorney General for the state of Ohio, Mark Weaver. It's always great to have you here on Law and Crime. What do you make of this deal? I mean, we'll talk about the layers to this case, and there are a lot, but for this to be Nikita Casap, here he is pleading guilty to the most serious charges of killing his mom and his stepdad.
Yeah, the first thing that struck me when I heard about the plea bargain was that these 2 charges he's pleading guilty to, both of them, have mandatory life sentences. Now, I suppose they could be run concurrent instead of consecutive, and I suppose there's always a parole opportunity. I don't know Wisconsin parole law, but in many states that's possible. And maybe some future governor might take pity on this young man. But the first thing that struck me was he's pleading to the 2 most serious crimes.
Why would, and I think that leads to the question of, like, why would he do that?
Well, first of all, why would he do any of this? He was found competent to stand trial, but he's a seriously disturbed young man. And so perhaps he didn't want to go through the trial and have every one of these things brought up. Maybe he knows it would be covered by places like Law and Crime and others, and just simply didn't want to go through that ordeal. Maybe he's accepted the fact that he's going to spend most, if not all of his life in prison. But we'll find out at the sentencing hearing if there's maybe some ability for this judge to give a little window of hope at the end of this man's life that he might be able to be free in his 60s or 70s.
Sadly, here at Law and Crime, we do cover a lot of cases of family violence, and this is certainly that. But since all of this happened in February of last year, it was like one layer after another. And then eventually we get to the point where he is communicating with someone overseas in Russia about this plan. He is following through with this plan. And then even there is, eventually his plan was to flee to Russia. And he thought he was part of some sort of effort that would assassinate the president of the United States. It feels like that could be something for the federal government to get involved in this. I mean, how likely is it now that he has settled these state charges, the federal government could come in and indict him?
Yeah, the double jeopardy clause of the Constitution that says you can't be tried twice for the same offense does not apply under the dual sovereign theory, which is state is one sovereign, federal government is another sovereign, which means he could, in theory, be charged federally for some of the charges and crimes you discussed. Do I think that's likely? Probably not. U.S. attorneys' offices that bring the charges are rather busy, particularly lately. And I doubt they're going to want to bring their own case when it looks very clear that this young man is going to be punished for 40, 50, 60, maybe all of the years or maybe all of his life.
You look at what he did, and it is just so awful in so many different ways. And then you think of the horrific aftermath of it and living with the bodies in the house. Then he is fleeing. He is taking money and jewelry with him as he flees. And then you have all the trail of communication he had where he was very aware of what he's doing. On the other side of it, and there's not really another side to it, but he's 17 years old. You just talk about like I guess a pity part of it. Like, is there any room for that here? As far as and I guess where could that come in his sentencing?
Yeah, every human is made in God's image, and every story like this is a tragedy on both sides of the equation. It's a tragedy that these parents were murdered the way they were, and it's a tragedy that his life is now ruined. I've said this before. The internet didn't cause this crime. This was evil. Sin has been with us since the Garden of Eden, right? So the internet didn't cause the crime. But 50 years ago, he couldn't have done this. He wouldn't have made contact with people who he thought he could join forces in this neo-Nazi satanic revolution to overthrow America. There's no doubt that the means for him to act out his demented thoughts have been amplified by the internet. So he's the one at fault. He's the one who should be punished. But it's one of those crimes where you're able to connect with people who are similarly crazy and similarly evil, and that advances the plot.
When it comes to, here's a kid in suburban Milwaukee who thinks that he is part of some plot to overthrow the US government, but it's believed that he was talking to someone in Russia. And how likely is it that we ever find out who exactly he was talking to?
Yeah, that's something that the FBI might want to look at. If in fact there is some uh, Russian government operative who was assisting this person, that's a real problem. Now, there's lots of crazy people who pretend to be folks on the internet. That could be what it was. But if it really literally was a government agent in Russia who's assisting some young person to try to overthrow the American government, that's a problem. We don't want that to happen. But the sort of intrigue that happens with VPNs and hiding behind fake names on the internet, pretty common. People are not who they say they are on the internet.
Looking at the case that prosecutors put together, and I mean, there's so many parts of it. There is video, apparently from inside the home showing him with the bodies, which is just so terrible to think about. But there's also the evidence that he took his mom's jewelry, he took cash. It kind of shows that I don't know if he would have made it through an airport checkpoint had he brought as much as he had with him. That definitely would have been a flag to the TSA. But when you're building a case and you're trying to show intent and that that he wasn't oblivious to something that was going on, when someone takes stuff like that from a house, how important is that to the case that you're building?
Yeah, if you're going to prosecute, you have to show that he intentionally did this, and so the planning, the emails, the internet traffic shows intent and planning, and then, well, they have abusive corpse charges, which is a minor charge compared to murder. But you mentioned something, Chris, that really struck me in these facts. There were internal surveillance cameras in this house. Many of us, myself included, have external security cameras so that we can capture threats from outside. Makes me wonder what these parents knew or worried about if they had surveillance cameras set up for the interior of their house.
And in some of these cases, and this one is certainly unique in a lot of ways, but you talk about like a young man, late teens, he was about to legally be an adult. Here he is communicating. I think Telegram is the app this time, but we see some of these apps that come up over and over and over again in these terrible kinds of cases. As someone who's a prosecutor yourself, you've seen family violence cases. I mean, how troublesome can some of these apps be? Because there's a lot of parents out there who like to think they know what their kids are saying online and who their kids actually are, but then you do have cases like this that you just don't know who they're actually talking to.
Yeah, it's remarkable the technology that's available for people like this young man to avoid scrutiny from his parents, even from law enforcement. We only need encrypted apps because there are bad people on the internet who try to access our information and use it against us. And so there are some good uses for encrypted apps. But typically, a young person using an encrypted app ought to have parents asking the question, why would you need that? If you're just texting with friends, Why can't you just text in a way that we can see it if we want to look at your phone? And as someone who's raised teenagers, and then this was our rule, is that this phone belongs to the parents. We charge it in the kitchen. We can look at it any time. We have your passwords. You want your own phone? When you're an adult, you live on your own, you'll have your own phone. But as long as you're living with us, we have access to what you're doing on the phone. And an encrypted app like Telegram or Signal, even being on that phone, is enough for a parent to say, what's going on here?
No, it just seems like, and the FBI was able to get a lot of information from this company, but certainly this communication was going on for a long period of time. And when you look at, in this case, it was called the Order of the Nine Angles, was the kind of neo-Nazi group that the ideology that it seemed like he was subscribing to. But there's also examples, whether it's this kind of neo-Nazi, whether it's a religious group, it seems like, there's this pattern with extremism that comes into place with young people that makes them susceptible. And just, I guess in your experience, have you seen, just how, like, why is it that this age that these kids seem to be so susceptible? I don't know how widespread it actually is, but then you suddenly have cases like this where someone has subscribed to something incredibly extreme and they really believe it to the point that they would do something like Nikita Casap is now saying that he did.
Yeah, brain scientists tell us that the human brain doesn't finish forming until the mid-20s, and for some young men, not even until the late 20s. So here you have a young man whose brain's not fully formed, and the last piece of the brain to fully form is the judgment, the good judgment section. All of us were teenagers, all of us know teenagers. That checks out with what we know about teenagers and their good judgment. So normally, for most teenagers, having a lack of good judgment results in things like staying out past curfew, drinking when you shouldn't, hanging out with the wrong set of kids. But for some very small subset, it turns into criminal behavior. And for the smallest, most evil subset, it turns into killing your parents as part of some weird internet plot.
Man, it's just this story is it's just at the end of the day, it's just incredibly sad because you have family members who are without their loved ones and they have to continue to live with this. For the prosecutors on this case, you get these guilty pleas. So you have him there. How much work is left to be done between now and March 5th when he's going to be sentenced?
Yeah, what I typically do as a prosecutor, once we've had the pleas, I work on a sentencing memorandum, which is the legal reasons why the judge should provide the sentence that we think that the judge should provide. So that's what's going to happen next. There's going to be a pre-sentence investigation report by probation officers who will interview this young man and the people who knew him and make a recommendation from the probation department. The defense may choose to do a sentencing memorandum. The prosecution may choose to do that. The judge will read all of those things. And here's what a lot of viewers may not know. Most judges have their mind made up well before they walk into court about what they're going to do. They've thought it through. Sometimes they might have left themselves a little bit of room to change it one way or the other based on the victim impact statement, based on what the defendant says. But most typically, judges have a good sense of what they want to do after having read the pre-sentence investigation and any sentencing memoranda from both sides.
I always think of that myself with just the ones that I've attended where it could be hours long, and you have these incredibly emotional statements and then it seems like it comes to this moment and then the judge looks down, reads through a few things for what feels like a couple of minutes and then comes, out with what feels like a prepared statement. So it feels like they already might have had their minds made up, though I'm sure they're listening. Um, moving forward with a case like this, I guess where does is it just state prison for the rest of his life? I mean, here's someone who's 17, 18 years old. He makes this decision when he's young, and now he is going to be in state prison with grown people who perhaps are career criminals forever.
Yeah, this is another part of the sad outcome of this tragedy and this horrible crime is that he will be the youngest, almost exactly the youngest man in a prison full of very tough men. For this sort of a charge, he can't go to very minimum security prisons. He's going to have to go to a medium security at least, and he will immediately become a target. Now, he won't be the kind of target that a child molester or a child rapist is. I'm prosecuting a child rape case next week, and those sort of defendants, when they get convicted and go to prison, they become serious targets. They become the number one target of the prisoners. So his crime won't make him a target, but his youth and his vulnerability will make him a target. It's going to be a very hard life for him in prison. These will not be easy years in prison.
No, and just a horrific crime that he has committed, and now he has pleaded guilty to. Mark Weaver, former assistant Deputy Attorney General of Ohio and prosecutor. Thank you as always for being with us on Law&Crime. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Chris.
Nikita Casap will be sentenced on March 5th. That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify, and you can also catch On the Case now on Peacock. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.